Some people enter our lives as gently as a breeze, yet they leave an echo deep within the soul. Others arrive like a storm, intense, chaotic, then depart, leaving a void that no words can fill. And when they're gone, we ask ourselves, were they the one meant for me? Not every deep connection is destiny. Not every intense emotion is love. But there are encounters we simply cannot ignore, as if something greater than ourselves has been awakened. That is when Jung's words become clear. A true relationship doesn't leave us unchanged. It transforms us. And love, if it is real, always carries that power of transformation. So, how can we know? How can we tell the difference between true love and a reflection of our unhealed parts? How can we recognize who is here to stay and who has come to awaken something within us that needs healing? This video does not promise a simple answer, but it offers you a lens drawn from the depths of Carl Jung, through which you can look inward and listen to the voice your soul has been quietly whispering all along. Number 1. What is destined love according to Jung? There are strange moments in life when a glance, an encounter that seems random, stirs something in you that defies explanation. Not because that person is so special or perfect, but because something within you has been awakened. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, the mysterious alignment of events in the outer world that meaningfully coincide with one's inner state. According to Jung, this is no accident. When someone appears just as your soul is shifting, they are more than a person. They are a living symbol, a gateway leading you back to yourself. Jung wrote, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see," meaning that for those who truly see, synchronicity isn't the exception. It's the ever-present truth. In analytical psychology, Jung believed that we don't love with our rational minds, but with our unconscious. When we fall for someone, it's often not because they are ideal, but because they stir something within us that has yet to be recognized. This is especially true for archetypes like the anima and animus, inner representations of the feminine and masculine within each of us. When these archetypes remain unintegrated, we tend to project them onto others. That is why certain people make our hearts race and make us believe they are fated. But the truth may be the opposite. They are not destiny, they are a signal of an unhealed part of the soul. Jung emphasized, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The same is true in love. We often get drawn into repeating relationships, familiar emotional patterns from childhood, seeking approval, fearing abandonment, longing for rescue. And we call these intense experiences true love or destined connections. But perhaps what we're really encountering is a wound trying to be seen. Imagine this. You meet someone, and in an instant, it feels like you've known them forever. You talk for hours, and everything aligns in uncanny ways. You call it a soul connection. But after weeks or months, you find yourself trapped in a whirlwind of draining emotions, hope, disappointment, and dependence. What does it mean? Jung wouldn't rush to say, "They're not the right one." He would ask, "What have you learned from this relationship? What part of you was reflected? What was activated?" Because sometimes people don't come to love you. They come so you can see yourself. Take an example. A man is repeatedly drawn to cold, distant women, always feeling he has to prove himself to be worthy of their affection. After many failed relationships, he sees a therapist. Through dreams and recurring behaviors, they discover his childhood wound. His mother was also emotionally distant, and he grew up believing, "Only if I do well am I worthy of love." Jung called this pattern a compulsion to repeat, an unconscious urge to recreate old wounds, hoping for a different ending. When he loves, he's not loving the woman in front of him. He's unconsciously searching for his mother. And that's not fate. That's an incomplete healing process. So, what is destined love? According to Jung, it's when someone enters your life not just to bring comfort, but to stir your soul. They awaken the part of you you've forgotten, resurrect old dreams, and bring you face to face with yourself. Jung compared love to a chemical reaction. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. If that love doesn't transform you, maybe it isn't real love. But if it shakes you to the core through pain or light, then it holds something sacred. Destined love, in Jung's view, is not always peaceful or easy. It often arrives as a disruption. It pulls you out of your comfort zone and forces you to face old wounds, the shadows you try to avoid. Jung called this the shadow, the rejected parts of the self. And the ones we love most intensely are often those who trigger our shadow the strongest, not to hurt us, but so we can no longer ignore ourselves. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. True love is not a place to escape your inner life. It is where you gather the courage to enter it." A classic example in Jungian literature is the man who dreams of an ideal woman, beautiful, gentle, mysterious. But the closer he gets, the more she withdraws. Eventually, he realizes she doesn't exist. That is anima projection, casting an internal feminine image onto the outside world. She was never real, but a symbol of an unintegrated part within. When you withdraw the projection, you don't lose the other person, you find yourself. Love is no longer an external destiny, but a door to your inner journey. And in love, awakening often comes through discomfort. If you're in a relationship that hurts, ask yourself, what in me is being stirred? What lesson am I being called to learn? Because if you don't ask, you may go from person to person, carrying the same wound, calling it fate, when in truth it's an unconscious loop. Destined love, through the lens of Carl Jung, is not perfect harmony, but an intentional meeting between two souls evolving. It's not about saving one another, but about triggering each other's spiritual growth. It may be filled with conflict, but it doesn't avoid truth. It may not last forever, but it leaves a permanent transformation. In the end, to know whether someone is the right one, don't just ask, "Do I love them?" Ask instead, "Who am I becoming in this relationship?" If you see yourself growing, deepening, becoming more honest and whole, then perhaps you've met a destined love, not because they complete you, but because they awakened something sacred in you that no one else could touch. And as Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." If love turns you inward and wakes you up, then that is the deepest magic of all human connection, the return to yourself. Number 2, signs of love from the soul, not from the wound. When we begin to realize that not every intense connection is destiny, another door quietly opens, the door that leads back inward. We sit with ourselves in the rare stillness after an emotional storm and begin to ask a different question. one deeper, more honest. What does love from the soul look like, as opposed to love from the wound? This question is not merely a thought, but a calling, an urge from within that you can no longer ignore. Because perhaps deep down you've already felt it. Some relationships leave you drained, but others compel you to face yourself most honestly. Carl Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Awakening does not come from chasing the light, but from the moment you are brave enough to face the darkness in your soul. And it is in that space of courage and truth that real love begins. Not the kind of love that makes you forget yourself, but the kind that leads you back home to yourself, more whole than ever before. Imagine being in an imperfect relationship, full of disagreements and moments of tension. But instead of shutting down, it invites you to open up. Each time you're triggered by something, a careless comment, prolonged silence, instead of blaming, you ask yourself, where is this reaction coming from the present or for the unhealed part of the past? When love helps you see yourself, it is love from the soul. Jung believed that each person is an internal ecosystem where archetypes like anima, animus, shadow, and self are always at play. A true relationship doesn't suppress these dynamics, but gives you space to explore them together. Nowhere is this clearer than in the experiences of those going through therapy. Many believe they're in deep love, but when they begin working through childhood memories, they realize the relationship isn't helping them grow. It's making them shrink. They see themselves playing the role of the good one, the undemanding one, the self-sacrificing one, all just to hold on to the other person. When love forces you to make yourself small just to survive, it is not love from the soul. Jung made it clear in The Undiscovered Self. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest gift in life is to become yourself. True love doesn't ask you to walk away from that, but brings you closer. A clear sign of soul-based love is that you don't feel smaller when you're with that person. They don't make you feel like you have to earn your worth or be better to be loved. Instead, they look at you with presence and acceptance, and that allows you to show up fully, without hiding the parts that are still unfinished. Jung believed real love always includes an honest view of the real self. Knowing your darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Once you've learned to face your shadows, you're no longer afraid of seeing others. True love doesn't require perfection. It only asks for honesty, first with yourself. Have you ever felt dependent in love, as if, without the other person, you wouldn't know who you are? That's a sign love is coming from lack, not from inner wholeness. In a soul-based love, you stay not because you need the other to survive, but because you freely choose to share your life with them. You don't need to be rescued. You don't need a hero to fill your emptiness. The one you love is not a savior. They are a companion on the path of growth, where both of you illuminate each other without stepping on one another to stay upright. One woman once shared that she was often drawn to elusive, rugged men. She craved the thrill of the chase, but always ended up abandoned. In therapy, she discovered she was recreating her childhood pattern. Her father was distant, always busy, and emotionally unavailable. Every love became a chance to rewrite that story, but the endings were always the same. She wasn't loving from the soul, She was loving from a wound that hadn't been healed. When she began to love herself and dared to choose someone she didn't have to chase, she finally understood peace. Not excitement, not intoxication, but the quiet of being herself, without apology, without performance. Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." In love, the deepest loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to express what truly matters to you. A healthy relationship creates space for that, without judgment, without interruption, without forcing explanation. You can speak your fears without being seen as weak. You can cry without having to say, "I'm sorry." That is soul love. Love that does not fear the dark, because it was born from the light of unconditional acceptance. Are you loving in that way? Ask yourself, do I feel relieved or tense when I'm with them? Am I living my truth or performing a role? And most importantly, am I being nourished or am I slowly being depleted? Real love brings you back to yourself, not away from your essential being. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." A healthy relationship is a mirror that lights up the heart, where you don't just see the other, but see yourself in that reflection. Soul love doesn't promise forever. It doesn't guarantee conflict-free days, but it does promise one thing. Both of you will be honest with yourselves and with each other. When difficulty arises, you won't disappear. When the other is hurting, you won't retreat. You don't love to fill a void. You love to grow together. And if one day you must part ways, that love won't leave behind ruin. It will leave behind gratitude, because it helped you see more clearly who you are. If you're wondering whether the love you're living is true, don't just listen to the racing of your heart. Listen to the deeper whisper within. Are you becoming a more honest, fuller version of yourself in loving them? If the answer is yes, then you are walking the path of soul love. A journey not just to love another, but to love yourself, fully, wholly, and truthfully. Number 3, pause. Is this love or an inner project? When a relationship helps you grow instead of shrink, when it allows you to be honest instead of hiding your imperfections, that is love from the soul. But the path of soul-centered love is not a straight line. At some point, you'll need to stop and ask yourself, am I truly in love with this person? Or am I unconsciously stepping into an unfinished inner project? This question might shake you at first, but if you're brave enough to face it, it can become a turning point in how you understand love and yourself. Carl Jung once said something unsettling, yet deeply awakening. We fall in love not with the person, but with the image we project onto them. We don't love the actual person. We love the image we cast onto them. This doesn't mean love is fake, but that it often originates from the unconscious, where inner archetypes like the anima and animus are always at work. When these archetypes remain unintegrated, they seek expression in the outer world, and we unknowingly call it love. Anima, the feminine image in the male psyche. Animus, the masculine image in the female psyche. Both are essential to our wholeness, but if they're not brought into awareness, they're easily projected onto others. A man with an undeveloped anima may feel magnetically drawn to a woman who seems mysterious and deep, as if she were the missing piece of his life. But in truth, He's falling in love with the feminine part of himself he has not yet encountered, not with who she truly is. A woman with an unintegrated animus may feel a deep pull toward the archetype of the strong, silent, decisive man, not because he is her true love, but because he represents the reason, the power, the direction she has not yet awakened within herself. When a relationship begins from projection, it often feels incredibly intense and emotional, but for the same reason, it's prone to collapse once the idealized image begins to crack and the real person no longer matches the fantasy. Jung described this process clearly in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious. The anima is not the soul in the dogmatic sense, but a natural archetype that expresses the fact that a man has a minority of feminine psychological qualities. The same applies to the animus in women. These archetypes are not actual people, but inherited symbols from the collective unconscious, representing the unfinished parts of our inner journey. And love, especially those that feel fated, is often the unconscious leading us toward what still needs to be integrated. Have you ever met someone who felt strangely familiar, as if you had known them in another life? Maybe it was love at first sight, a look, a voice that kept you awake for nights. You believed, this is the one, your destiny. But then, after a while, you felt disillusioned, disappointed, even betrayed without knowing why. That isn't failure. It's a sign the projection has withdrawn, and the person is no longer a mirror for your unconscious. They are now simply themselves. And at that point, you face a difficult but necessary question. Can I still love them, now that they're no longer the image I imagined? If the answer is yes, then love can enter a deeper level, where reality replaces illusion, where both see each other without the lens of longing. If the answer is no, then you're not failing, you are waking up. Jung reminded us, every projection is a theft of reality. The moment you stop projecting, you begin to see people as they are, not as you need them to be. A vivid example is that of a middle-aged man who had been through 3 failed marriages. Each time he fell in love, it was a whirlwind. The woman was brilliant, magnetic, captivating, almost goddess-like. But over time he would feel lost, controlled, suffocated, and then flee. In therapy, he realized that all these women reminded him of the mother he idolized but also feared. He wasn't in love with them. He was in love with his unintegrated anima, the part of himself he needed to confront to become whole. And what about you? Can you pause, look back at the ones you've loved and hurt for, and ask, was I truly loving them, or loving a part of myself I hadn't accepted? Maybe it was your vulnerability, your need to be guided, your buried rebellion from childhood. That person may have been a projection screen, and your heart, the film. But the beautiful thing is this: once you pause and see it clearly, you're no longer trapped in the old script. You begin to rewrite your story, not from repetition, but from awareness. Jung didn't condemn projection. He knew it was an inevitable part of the journey of love. But he warned, projection makes the whole world a replica of one's own unknown face. When you don't know who you are, the entire world becomes a mirror reflecting the parts of you you've never dared to see. And love, in its rawest form, is the stage where our deepest projections come to life. So if you are in love, or cannot forget someone who once walked through your life, be brave enough to ask, Am I truly seeing them? Or am I searching for a lost part of myself in their shape? That question may hurt, but it's an awakening pain, not a pain of loss. And once you pass through it, love is no longer an escape into another. It becomes a bridge back to yourself. True love begins when projection ends, when you see the other person in their full light and shadow and choose to stay anyway. But deeper love still is when you see yourself in full, all your light, all your darkness, and still choose to love yourself without condition. Jung wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Wholeness doesn't come from amputating parts of ourselves, but by embracing them all, even the ones we once rejected." Are you ready to pause, not to retreat, but to truly see? Because sometimes the only thing standing between you and real love is not the distance between you and another person. It's the distance between you and yourself. Number 4, awareness. Exercise the difference between a project and destiny. And then, when you begin to see the other person no longer through the haze of expectation or projection, when you're brave enough to ask yourself, am I truly in love with them, or am I just seeing a shadow of myself? That is the moment you stand at the threshold of transformation. Not necessarily a turning point in the relationship, but a turning point within yourself. Yet awakening is one thing, staying awake is another. Because not everyone finds it easy to distinguish between a fated connection and an unresolved inner project. So, how do you tell the difference between love from the soul and unconscious programming disguised as passion? The answer begins with you and with feelings that never lie. Carl Jung once said something worth engraving in your mind. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The scariest thing isn't facing someone else, it's facing all of yourself, the radiant and the silent parts alike. And it is within love that these forgotten parts speak the loudest. That's why this exercise isn't meant to evaluate who the other person is, but to help you listen to who you are in that relationship. Start with something very simple, yet deeply transformative. Write down all the emotions that arise when you think of this person. Don't judge them. Don't try to analyze. Just be honest. Do you feel relieved or anxious? Do you feel at peace or constantly afraid of being abandoned? Do you feel free to be yourself, or are you trying to maintain a version of yourself that is more lovable? These feelings aren't conclusions, they're a map. As Jung wrote in Psychological Types, emotion is the chief source of consciousness. There is no change from darkness to light or from inertia to movement without emotion. Emotion is the source of awareness. Without it, there can be no awakening. A woman once shared in therapy that she always felt fully herself with her partner. They could talk for hours about things she'd never told anyone else. But when asked, "How do you feel if he doesn't reply to your message for 3 hours?" she hesitated. "Anxious. My heart races. I feel scared, not good enough." That was the clue. Part of her felt inspired, but a deeper part was gripped by the fear of abandonment, not from the present, but from an old wound yet to be healed. Jung would not judge her. He would ask, "What will you do with that fearful part? Will you listen, or will you keep running from it?" Next, observe your life energy when you're with that person. Do you feel yourself expanding or shrinking? Is your creativity being awakened or slowly drained each time you suppress yourself? A relationship born from the soul does not deplete you, it nourishes you, not because of grand gestures from the other person, but because it brings you closer to your truest self. Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "A creative person has little power over his own life. He is not free. He is captive and driven by his daemon." Here, the daemon is not a demon. It is the inner force of creativity and life. A healthy love doesn't kill that force. It awakens it. A man once described how, in a past relationship, he always felt forced to be the rational one, the pillar, the steady wall, though deep down he was sensitive, dreamy, and longed to speak of strange dreams. His former partner never listened to those parts. He didn't share them, not because she forbade him, but because he didn't allow himself to be fragile. Then he met someone new who asked, "Have you ever painted? There's imagery and color in how you speak." That small question awakened a part of his soul that had been asleep, and that was when he knew this relationship was helping him reintegrate the parts of himself he had once left behind. Integration is the clearest sign that love is leading you home to yourself. Jung called this the process of individuation. In The Development of Personality, he wrote, "Individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming oneself." Individuation is not selfishness. It is the journey of becoming yourself, not fragmented to fit in, not sacrificing truth to maintain a bond. And if the person beside you helps you walk that path, they are not just a partner, they are a soul companion. So ask yourself, am I integrating or fragmenting in this relationship? If you find yourself losing the ability to hear your inner voice, forgetting what makes you feel alive, what sparks your joy, you may be living an inner project, not a destined love. But if you find yourself reconnecting to your emotions, learning to face your fears without running, speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, then you're not just in love, you're evolving. Right. Dare to face yourself with this final question. Does this relationship help me live more truthfully, or am I losing myself piece by piece? Don't fear the answer. The truth may hurt, but as Jung once said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. No awakening comes without pain. But on the other side of that pain is freedom. The ability to love, not from a hunger to be filled, but from the fullness of a soul that knows who it is. Are you ready to pick up the pen? Not to write about someone else, but to rewrite yourself. Not as a role, but in the honest light of a being no longer divided. Number 5. Love as a doorway back to yourself. And if you've dared to write down the truth of who you are in the relationship, without avoidance, without compromise, then you've already taken a step. Not toward the other, but toward yourself. Love, if seen only as a destination, will always leave us disoriented. But if you're brave enough to see it as a doorway, you'll begin to understand this. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay, but each one can open a part of you that you've never dared to step into before. And that is the quietest gift of even the seemingly fleeting connections. Carl Jung once wrote a short yet weighty line, like a moment of revelation. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every real encounter is a transformation. But what he made even clearer, and what we must underline here, is this: no true love can occur if you have not truly become yourself. Because if you have not returned to your authentic being, then no matter how wonderful the other person is, they can only love a version of you that is incomplete, distorted, or trying to be someone else. Another profound statement by Jung brings us to the heart of this final part. The meeting of two people is only meaningful when they have both found themselves first. The meeting has meaning only when both have found themselves. This doesn't mean you must be perfect, fully healed, or completely free of wounds before you're allowed to love. It simply means you must enter love with self-recognition, that you know who you are, what you seek, and that you are conscious enough not to confuse love with salvation. One story from therapy still lingers with me. A man in his 30s, after many short-lived relationships, fell deeply for a woman who was intelligent and strong. She entered his life at a time when he was lost, professionally unanchored, and drained of self-worth. "She made me want to live again," he said. "I felt seen." But when the relationship stabilized and she expressed a desire to build a clear future, he pulled away. Not because she did anything wrong, but because he had never truly met himself. And because of that, he didn't know how to let someone else meet him. We often confuse love with validation. When someone looks at us gently, when someone listens, we think we are being loved. But love isn't that simple. If you've never sat quietly with yourself, never faced the void, never touched your deepest loneliness without trying to cover it up, then no matter how sincere the other person is, they won't stay long. Because they weren't invited to love a living soul, but to patch a part of you still struggling to survive. Jung emphasized this in Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. Loneliness doesn't stem from being alone. It comes from not being able to share what truly matters. Often not because others refuse to listen, but because we've never truly made contact with those parts ourselves. That's why some people leave a relationship and still feel hollow. They haven't lost a lover, they've lost the mirror they used to glimpse themselves. So what is true love for, if not to fill the emptiness? Jung would answer, destined love does not come to heal you. It comes to remind you that you were never broken. The appearance of the other is not a missing piece, but a mirror reflecting what has always been there, unseen. When love walks in the right direction, it doesn't dissolve you, it reflects you. I see you, it says, and in that seeing I see myself more clearly. A woman once shared that, after years of chasing the archetype of the strong, assertive man, she ended up loving someone quiet, gentle, and emotionally subtle. And in that stillness, she finally heard the voice within. "He didn't come to tell me who I was," she said. "He gave me space to find it on my own. And for that reason, the love wasn't loud, but it was lasting." That is the highest form of mature love, when you no longer seek someone to make you feel loved, but someone with whom you can deepen the love you already carry for yourself. Such love doesn't arrive when you beg for it in desperation. It doesn't show up when you still wish for someone to make you happy. It appears when you've learned to be alone without feeling lacking. When you've learned to look at yourself without disdain. Jung described this as the process of whole making, the journey of becoming whole. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Wholeness doesn't come from rejecting your darkness. It comes from embracing all of it, the wounds, the shadows, the parts you once tried to hide. So if you are waiting for true love, start by asking, have I become myself yet? Because if you haven't, even when love arrives, it will have nowhere to take root. True love requires soil that has been turned, an honest soul that knows what it seeks, that no longer hopes someone else will rewrite its story. The final question I leave with you is not, do they love me, but, do I have the courage to love myself before I love anyone else? Because if the answer is yes, then anyone who enters your life is no longer there to fill a void. They are there to expand your wholeness. And when love arrives in that state of fullness, it is no longer a need, it is a choice. And there, you no longer seek someone to rescue you. You seek someone who can walk with you all the way home to yourself. Looking back on the entire journey, from unconscious attraction to the reflections of our wounds, from the intoxication of fate to the inner work of awareness, we begin to understand love is not merely an emotion, it is a process of spiritual maturation. Carl Jung named this process individuation, the path by which each person returns to their truest, most unique and whole self. And love, if it is sincere and deep enough, does not obstruct this journey. On the contrary, it becomes one of its most sacred expressions. A truly aligned relationship is not defined by the most intense feelings or the most eternal promises, but by the space it creates for you to be yourself, without fear, without shrinking, without performing a role to be loved. This kind of love does not arise from a need to be filled, but from a wholehearted choice. And you can only make such a choice when you have touched the wholeness within. Do not wait for the right person to appear as a savior. Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you are mature enough not to need rescuing, you'll recognize someone who can truly walk beside you. And when two whole beings meet, they do not love out of lack. They love out of a desire to go deeper, together, into the soul. Destined love is not a reward handed down by fate. It is a test, a calling. But if you are brave enough to walk through it, through the projections, the fears, the thirst for validation, you'll discover that it is not just a relationship. It is a doorway into the deepest parts of who you are. And that is real love. The kind that does not make you lose yourself, but the kind that helps you find yourself more clearly, more completely, and more truthfully than ever before. Throughout his life studying psychology, Carl Jung explored the deepest, most mysterious layers of the human mind, where the collective unconscious and the shadow self reside. Jung believed that beneath the surface of our daily behaviors lies an unconscious world filled with buried memories, rejected dark aspects, and unresolved internal conflicts. These repressed parts not only affect how we perceive ourselves, but also strongly influence our relationships. Words are not merely expressions. According to Jung, they are the truest mirrors of the unconscious. Sometimes, words that seem harmless, even sweet, are the perfect disguise for psychological wounds, avoidance of responsibility, and even subtle manipulation. A person may deny their flaws, but their words will always inadvertently reveal the truth. Recognizing these signs not only helps you protect your mental well-being, but also opens a path for personal growth, freeing you from toxic bonds. So, if a man says these things to you, be cautious. It is not just mere words. It could be a warning sign of shadows yet to be faced. Number 1. You have to accept me as I am. Some phrases may seem harmless at first, even sounding sincere and admirable, but behind them can lie a complex and toxic psychological system. One such phrase is, "You have to accept me as I am." For many, this may appear as an expression of sincerity, a desire to be fully accepted. However, according to Carl Jung's psychological analysis, this statement carries a deeper implication. It is a sign of resistance to change and a subtle justification for negative behaviors. In Jung's philosophy, a human being does not possess a clear and fixed ego, but also harbors an inner shadow, something he called the shadow self. Jung once wrote in Psychology and Religion, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. The unconscious shadow contains the dark aspects we deny, the unwanted traits, and the flaws we deliberately avoid confronting." When a man declares, "You have to accept me as I am," it does not mean he is being honest with himself. In reality, he is protecting his shadow, refusing to face the weaknesses he knows exist, but is unwilling to acknowledge. This is where a relationship begins to face challenges. A person who does not confront their shadow often tends to shift responsibility onto the other party. When a man uses this statement as a shield, he is refusing to change, which means denying the potential for growth and progress. Jung once said, "What you resist persists. What you refuse to face will continue to exist." If someone consistently emphasizes that they do not need to change, it means those problems will persist, prolonging and gradually eroding the relationship. This seemingly harmless phrase is, in fact, a warning sign, a way to evade responsibility. A typical example is in a relationship where a woman notices unhealthy behaviors in a man, such as unwarranted jealousy, uncontrollable anger, or even excessive control, and tries to address the issue. His response is, "This is who I am, you just have to accept it." At that moment, she faces two choices: either accept his true self and continue enduring, or leave to protect herself. But is that true self really his nature? Or is it merely a version of his unacknowledged shadow, a long repressed part of his psyche that he refuses to admit? An emotionally mature person would never use the excuse of accepting one's nature to justify their unwillingness to change. They understand that everyone needs to grow, change, and learn from mistakes. Jung once asserted, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment is not achieved by imagining light, but by facing one's darkness. In a real-life story, a woman shared that her husband would always use this phrase whenever she raised concerns about his habit of excessive drinking. Every time she expressed worries about their health and family safety, he would simply say, "That's just how I am. You have to accept it." She struggled with the thought, questioning whether she was asking too much. Eventually, she realized that love does not mean unconditionally accepting all negative behaviors. Forgiveness and tolerance are meaningful only when the other person is willing to change, not when they use it as an excuse to continue hurting others. If a man refuses to grow, refuses to take responsibility and uses this phrase as a defense mechanism, the woman will gradually find herself rowing the boat alone in that relationship. When every problem is placed on her shoulders and the personal growth of both partners stagnates, the relationship will lose balance and fall into crisis. If your partner repeatedly uses this phrase when you bring up the need for change, listen carefully to see if it is genuine honesty or merely avoidance. Usually, this phrase accompanies negative behaviors they do not want to change, such as irrational jealousy, emotional control, or refusal to take personal responsibility. Set clear boundaries. Be straightforward in expressing that love does not mean tolerating all negative behaviors. If he refuses to change, it is not your fault, but his limitation. If acceptance is unconditional, it is not love, but emotional surrender. Refusing to change is not a sign of high self-esteem or a strong personality. On the contrary, it reveals inner weakness and fear of facing oneself. Jung once remarked, "Knowing your darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." If a person does not understand and accept their own shadow, they will never be able to maintain a healthy relationship. For a relationship to endure, both partners must grow together. No one is perfect, and therefore we must take responsibility for our flaws. If a man truly loves, he will not refuse to change just because of nature. He will understand that personal growth not only brings happiness to himself, but also shows respect for his partner. Looking back, the phrase, "You have to accept me as I am," only holds meaning when spoken with a sense of responsibility, with the desire for self-improvement rather than as a means to avoid change. If a man uses this phrase to escape confronting his shadow, it simply shows that he is not ready for a genuine relationship. In love, no one should bear the burden of another's stagnation. Accepting oneself does not mean abandoning self-improvement. It means having the courage to face oneself to become better. Number 2, all my exes were crazy, toxic. And then, when unconditional acceptance is no longer enough to cover up stubborn and negative behaviors, another form of rationalization emerges. That is when he starts telling you about his past relationships with a sneering bitterness. All my exes were crazy, toxic. At first, these words may seem like harmless confessions, but if you listen more closely, you will realize that behind them lies a sophisticated mask of blame-shifting, denial of responsibility, and, most importantly, psychological projection, a concept Carl Jung studied thoroughly. Jung once wrote in Ion, "Researches into the phenomenology of the self. Projections change the world into the replica of one's unknown face." When a man claims that all his exes were crazy or toxic, he is not merely talking about others. In reality, he is exposing the darkness within himself. Through projection, the flaws, insecurities, and negative behaviors he is unwilling to confront are projected onto others, turning them into the culprits of all harm and chaos. In his mind, he is not wrong. He is not at fault. The problem always lies with the others. The scariest part of projection is its ability to distort perception and mask the truth. Jung explained that humans tend to avoid their imperfections by attributing them to others. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But instead of facing this reality, this man chooses to escape, denying that his controlling, jealous, or irresponsible behaviors contributed to the breakdowns. Instead, he turns every woman who has passed through his life into the crazy or toxic one, as if they were the sole cause of every issue. This story of projection is not just an abstract theory. It happens in many toxic relationships in real life. A woman once shared that her boyfriend constantly spoke bitterly about his exes. He insisted that they were all controlling, overly jealous, and always tried to change him. At first, she felt sympathy for him, believing she could be different, the one he would truly appreciate and love. But after just a few months, she began to notice that he was the one who was controlling, irrationally jealous, and always quick to shift blame when conflicts arose. When she brought up these issues, he would immediately snap back, "You're just like them." It was an endless loop where he was always the victim and everyone around him was the troublemaker. Carl Jung called this behavior the victim, an archetype of a person who constantly places themselves in the role of the victim to avoid responsibility. When a man keeps repeating that all his exes were crazy or toxic, he is building a perfect defense mechanism to mask his immaturity. Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." But instead of accepting the truth and trying to change, he blames everyone else, turning himself into the victim of a series of crazy relationships. However, the danger of the statement, "all my exes were crazy, toxic," does not stop there. It is also a strong warning signal for the current woman in his life. When you hear this, ask yourself, is it true that they were all crazy, or is he just repeating the same behavioral pattern? Because if a person has never looked back at themselves, never admitted their own mistakes, that cycle will repeat. Not because the exes were crazy, but because he has never learned to face his own shadow. This projection creates a dangerous loop. The new woman in his life easily falls into the belief that she will be different, that she will be the one to save him from the long string of failed relationships. But the reality is, if he does not change, if he remains trapped in his darkness and refuses to take responsibility, that tragic story will continue to repeat itself. You will not be the different one, but just another version in the long line of names he blames. When someone repeatedly mentions that all their exes were crazy or toxic, pay attention to whether they are willing to accept their part in the breakdowns. Typically, such people will never mention their own mistakes, but will focus solely on criticizing others. Ask a direct question. Have you ever thought that maybe you contributed to those breakups? An emotionally mature person will be willing to talk openly and acknowledge their faults, while a manipulator will deflect or avoid the question. This is the moment you need to evaluate whether you truly want to step into this cycle of blame. Jung once stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." If a man is unwilling to face his unconscious self, if he continues projecting his wounds and pain onto others, then he is not only destroying his relationships, but also trapping himself in a toxic, never-ending cycle. And then, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to be the next character in his story of "they were all crazy"? Are you prepared to row the boat alone in a relationship where every problem is dumped on you, while he forever remains the innocent victim? A man who has never admitted his mistakes will never grow up. And in that relationship, you will not only be his partner, but also the bearer of all the pain, all the endless projections. Awakening is not about wanting to save someone else. It is about knowing when to walk away to protect yourself. Number 3. If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask. And then, when the stories of crazy exes no longer hold enough weight to manipulate emotions, a more sophisticated tactic is introduced. If you loved me, you'd do what I ask. At first glance, this statement may seem like a simple affirmation of love, a sincere request born from a desire to be understood. But beneath its sweet exterior, it is a classic display of emotional blackmail, what Carl Jung described as the most subtle form of emotional manipulation, where love is transformed into a tool for coercion and control. In The Undiscovered Self, Carl Jung once wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other." The phrase, "if you loved me," is not an expression of unconditional love. It is a way of using love as an invisible whip, forcing the other person into submission. When a man uses love as an excuse to impose his desires, he is stripping away the freedom of his partner, turning her into an emotional puppet, controlled by the strings of emotional extortion. The most frightening aspect of emotional blackmail is its subtlety. Unlike clear-cut emotional abuse or blatant control, this form of manipulation hides beneath the guise of love, making it hard for the person experiencing it to recognize what is happening. Jung called these behaviors the shadow self's control, where repressed dark aspects seek to dominate others to compensate for inner powerlessness. That man cannot control his own emotions or pain, so he seeks to control you, his partner, through the concept of love. The statement, "If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask," is also indicative of the archetype, the manipulator. According to Jung, manipulators often cannot confront their fear of abandonment, insecurities, and feelings of helplessness. Instead of acknowledging these weaknesses, they try to control others through emotions, especially by leveraging the idea of true love. They create unspoken standards that only when you fulfill their desires are you truly loving them. And if you refuse, guilt immediately follows. A woman once shared her story of how her boyfriend always used this phrase whenever she refused to do something he wanted. When she wanted to spend time with friends or pursue her hobbies, he would always say, "If you loved me, you would stay with me. You wouldn't need those people." At first, she accepted it, thinking that sacrificing a little to please him wouldn't hurt. But gradually, every decision she made became influenced by guilt, fearing that if she did not comply, it would signal a lack of love. She lost friends, abandoned her hobbies, and eventually lost herself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But when love is manipulated through emotional blackmail, that privilege is gradually stripped away. You are no longer yourself. You become a controlled version, forced to change, to concede, to maintain someone else's satisfaction. The more you try to meet their demands, the deeper you fall into the spiral of dependency and lose your identity. What's more dangerous is that this manipulation never stops at a fixed point. When you concede once, the next demand becomes bigger, more complicated, and more controlling. Jung once warned, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakes." A man who forces his partner to follow his desires under the guise of love is dreaming of an idealized version of a lover, someone without boundaries, without personality, and only obedient. But that is just an illusion, because no one can forever satisfy someone who is never content. This subtle control gradually strips a woman of her emotional freedom, her decision-making power, and her sense of self-worth. Each time she gives in, the boundary is blurred and her freedom is further restricted. And the saddest part is, women manipulated by emotional blackmail often do not realize it until it is too late. They are caught in a cycle of submission, of guilt, and gradually become dependent on the man's approval. So, how do you break out of this cycle? Carl Jung once emphasized, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." When you recognize the signs of emotional manipulation, when you see love being used as a tool for control, that is the moment you need to stand up and protect yourself. True love is not submission. It is not sacrificing personal freedom to please someone else. Love is companionship, growth together, not emotional imprisonment hidden beneath sweet words of conditional demands. Only when you recognize the manipulation, only when you are strong enough to refuse unconditional submission, can you step out of the shadow that others want you to become. Jung said it best, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And that awakening is the path to reclaiming your freedom, to rediscovering yourself. Number 4, you're not enough for me. When emotional blackmail is no longer enough to control, when demands wrapped in the sweetness of love no longer make you submit, another weapon is brought out: judgment. It does not have to be harsh criticism or explosive anger. Sometimes, it is just a seemingly simple statement that is powerful enough to push you into a deep pit of self-doubt and questioning. "You're not enough for me." Perhaps you have heard this statement at least once in your life. It is often spoken in moments when you do not meet expectations, when you do not follow his desires, or simply when he feels unsatisfied with anything about you. That statement is not just a remark. It is a heavy blow to your self-esteem, a denial of everything you have tried to build. More frighteningly, it is a clear expression of the psychological projection that Carl Jung described so deeply in his studies. In Psychological Types, Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When a man repeatedly claims that you are not good enough, that all your efforts are still insufficient, he is projecting his inner dissatisfaction onto you. The unmet expectations, the unhealed wounds, all the pain he has never confronted are transferred to you as if you were the source of all that incompleteness." Imagine this as a distorted mirror he looks into every day. Instead of seeing his shortcomings, his pain and insecurities, he sees them reflected onto you, the person closest to him. You become the distorted image, the cause of all dissatisfaction. And then he utters the judgment, "You're not enough." But in reality, what he is truly saying is, "I am not enough for myself, and I cannot accept that." This statement is also a clear sign of the archetype, the critic. Carl Jung described this archetype as a dark part within the human mind, always seeking imperfections in others to cover up its inner emptiness. The critic is never satisfied, never feels fulfilled, because the emptiness inside is a bottomless pit. When a man repeatedly tells you, "You're not enough," it is not an objective assessment of you, but rather a desperate reflection of his inadequacies. A real-life example of this is the story of a woman who shared that her husband always told her she was not refined enough, not smart enough, or even not beautiful enough. Every time she tried to improve herself, to meet the standards he set, he would find another flaw, another aspect where she was not enough. Her life gradually turned into an endless chase, where she constantly tried to meet expectations, but never reached his satisfaction. Only later did she realize that the problem was not her lack of worth, but the emptiness and insecurity within him, things he had never been willing to confront. Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Those who cannot accept themselves will constantly seek ways to blame, judge, and hurt others. They create images of others' imperfections to reassure themselves that the problem does not lie with them. When he tells you, 'You're not enough,' what he is truly doing is refusing to face himself, denying the shortcomings he cannot accept." The most dangerous aspect of this kind of emotional manipulation is that it makes you start doubting yourself. You begin to wonder if you are not good enough. You question whether your efforts are truly meaningless. Gradually, you start to lose confidence, accepting that your value depends on his approval. This is the point where you lose your identity, becoming dependent on his emotions and evaluations. Jung once warned, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." This is equally true in love. The greatest tragedy of love is when you lose yourself, trying to become the perfect image in someone else's eyes. To escape this cycle, the first step is to recognize the manipulation. Ask yourself, am I not enough? Or is he simply incapable of loving fully? Because if a person truly loves you, they would not use their inner lack to hurt you. He would not need to diminish your value to feel greater. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That awakening is the strength you need to escape judgmental words filled with control. When you realize that your value does not lie in someone else's validation, when you understand that his dissatisfaction is the result of unhealed wounds, you will no longer be manipulated by toxic statements like, "You're not enough for me." You are enough, and your worth does not require anyone's judgment to be recognized. Do you find a reflection of yourself somewhere in these kinds of judgments? How many times have you questioned whether you were good enough, perfect enough, just because of a statement that seemed accidental but was filled with control? Do not let your worth be determined by someone else's insecurities. Remember, you are enough, just as you are. And if someone cannot see that, the problem is not with you, it is with them. Number 5. Do whatever you want. There are some phrases that seem relaxed, gentle, and tolerant, but in reality they carry the power of terrifyingly subtle control. One of them is, "Do whatever you want." At first glance, it sounds like permission, an absolute freedom given by someone who loves you. But in reality, according to Carl Jung's psychological analysis, this statement is a form of passive aggression, a hidden form of hostility, a silent yet powerful weapon. Carl Jung once wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other." The phrase, "do whatever you want," is not truly consent, nor is it an expression of unconditional love. It is the expression of the saboteur, an archetype of the hidden destroyer. one who does not attack openly, but chooses to manipulate emotions through silence and ambiguity. Imagine a situation. You want to go out with friends over the weekend. You've planned everything carefully, and you are feeling excited. You ask for his opinion, just hoping for a nod of approval or at least some sincere encouragement. But instead, he responds with a detached tone. Do whatever you want. There is no support, no objection, just a vague, indifferent statement. And suddenly, all the excitement within you dies. An anxiety replaces it, and you begin to wonder, is he mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Or is he disappointed because I want to spend time with others? And so, instead of happily enjoying your time, you spend the whole day worrying, explaining, and trying to reassure him, the person who never clearly expressed any disagreement. This is precisely the power of passive aggression that Carl Jung described in his studies of repressed behavior. According to Jung, people who cannot face conflict directly or are afraid to express their true feelings often choose hidden aggression through passivity or ambiguous statements. They do not outright forbid you. They do not express anger, but they also do not support you. The silence hidden behind the phrase, "do whatever you want," is a subtle judgment, a way to push you into self-questioning and emotional turmoil. A man who uses passive silence to manipulate your emotions is intentionally resisting direct communication, letting that silence linger and stretch out. He does not need to loudly object. He does not need to argue intensely. Just a seemingly permissive statement, and he succeeds in making you feel guilty, confused, and lost in your thoughts. The archetype of the saboteur emerges when someone chooses to hurt others through concealed actions. They do not attack directly, but neither do they accept peace. Do whatever you want is not permission. It is a calculated retreat, placing all the responsibility on your shoulders. If everything goes well, he smiles and enjoys it. But if anything goes wrong, you are the only one to blame. It is a clever form of manipulation where the speaker does not need to take a stand, but still manages to control the psychological state of the other. A woman once shared that every time she made a decision, no matter how small, like choosing a meal or something larger like a career move, her husband always responded with the same phrase, "It's up to you, do whatever you want." At first, she thought it was respect for her freedom. But then she realized, whenever things did not go his way, he would blame her, saying she had chosen wrong, that every problem was the result of the freedom she was allowed. And so, she gradually became afraid of making decisions, lost her confidence, and began to scrutinize everything through his eyes. Carl Jung analyzed the dangers of repressed behaviors very clearly. In Psychological Types, he wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." Those who choose passive aggression often live in that blurred line, where they do not want to face the truth, but are also unwilling to change. They let their emotions drift in silent hostility, turning others into targets for their insecurities and frustrations. The consequences of this manipulation are not just hidden conflicts. When you are constantly pushed into self-questioning, feelings of guilt and insecurity gradually erode your confidence. You start to think more about your actions, trying to please him, explaining more for small decisions, and even avoiding personal desires just to escape that permission dripping with irony. You slowly become someone who controls yourself, suppresses yourself, and loses the emotional freedom you should have had. When you awaken, you will realize that the ambiguity and passivity were never permission. They were cleverly disguised control. You will understand that true love never carries hidden hostility, and true freedom is never conditioned by guilt. So, have you ever heard the phrase, "Do whatever you want," from someone important in your life? And when you heard it, did you feel truly free? Or did it just bring endless discomfort, ambiguity, and anxiety? It is time to awaken and recognize the hidden manipulation behind the guise of letting go. Freedom never exists when you are controlled by passive silence. 5 seemingly harmless phrases contain deeply complex psychological layers that Carl Jung spent his life uncovering. "You have to accept me as I am" is not a genuine acceptance, but rather a justification for stubbornness, a refusal to change and grow. When someone uses this statement to defend their negative behaviors, they are rejecting the confrontation of their own shadow, while simultaneously shifting that responsibility onto someone else. Next, "All my exes were crazy, toxic," is not merely a story about the past, but an expression of psychological projection, where inner mistakes and wounds are transferred onto others, allowing them to avoid their responsibilities. This not only makes you doubt your self-worth, but also easily pulls you into the spiral of wanting to save someone who has no intention of changing. When the phrase, "If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask," emerges, love starts becoming a tool for control. This is the subtle form of emotional blackmail, where coercion is masked with the sweet shell of true love. Bit by bit, you lose your freedom, gradually becoming an emotional puppet, sacrificing your desires just to please someone else. And when all the control tactics no longer work, he shifts to the cruel psychological blow. "You're not enough for me." This is the typical expression of the critic, where he continuously criticizes and devalues you to fill the emptiness within himself. You are no longer yourself. You become a reflection of the inadequacies that he cannot accept in himself. Finally, "Do whatever you want," which seems like a light, permissive statement, is a form of passive aggression. There's no need for orders, no need for shouting, just silence and indifference, and he pushes you into endless self-doubt and guilt. You become the one who self-monitors, who questions your own decisions, who wonders where you went wrong for him to react that way. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." If these statements are not recognized in time, they will sink deep into your subconscious, controlling your emotions and influencing your actions, dragging you into a spiral of manipulation and hurt. But awakening is not just about recognition. It is a decisive action to step out of these toxic psychological games. If you find yourself somewhere in these psychological patterns, it is time for you to look straight into the truth and awaken from this subtle control. Protect your value. Choose healthy relationships where love is not manipulation or confinement, but companionship, growth, and mutual respect. If this analysis has helped you realize something profound, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications today. Let's awaken together, step out of the shadows of control, and build a life of freedom and wholeness. You deserve true, healthy, and fully respectful love.